Federal prosecutors just revealed what investigators say they found on an old Lil Durk phone, and part of it goes directly back to the man prosecutors identify as the person who shot King Von. According to newly filed court documents, investigators recovered screenshots discussing that man's release from custody on bond and getting the address where he would be staying while on house arrest. But that wasn't the only thing sitting on this phone. Prosecutors say investigators also found material connected to another alleged target, including a concert flyer they now connect to an alleged ambush. And years later, after looking at what Georgia investigators had originally recovered, the FBI apparently decided that wasn't enough. 5 years after this phone was seized, federal investigators went back and got the actual physical device. And that raises one big question: what else were they trying to find? Let's break this down. According to the government's August 7th filing, investigators searched a forensic copy of a cell phone that had originally been seized from Durk's Georgia residence back in 2021. Prosecutors say they identified multiple images they believe were related to seeking revenge against two people identified in the court papers by the initials TB and TL. TL is especially significant because prosecutors identify him in this filing as the individual who shot and killed Davon Bennett, better known as King Von, on November 6, 2020. And this is where things start getting interesting. According to prosecutors, investigators found screenshots of messages discussing TL's release from state custody on bond. Those screenshots also allegedly discuss getting the address where he would be staying while on house arrest. And the government says metadata from the phone showed that the screenshot was taken around the time of his release. Now, there's one important thing we have to make clear. The filing says these screenshots were recovered from Durk's phone. It does not say Durk personally typed the message asking for the address. That's an important difference. And later in this same filing, prosecutors acknowledged that the original phone extraction apparently did not contain regular text message conversations between the user of the phone and other people. What investigators did recover included images, screenshots, and metadata. So this isn't a case where prosecutors are showing a full text conversation and saying, "Here's Durk sending this message." That's not what this particular filing establishes. But prosecutors clearly believe the screenshots themselves matter to the larger case. And then they reveal something else. Investigators say the same phone contained a screenshot advertising a May 1st, 2021 concert involving the person identified in the documents as TB. Now, normally, somebody having a concert flyer saved on their phone wouldn't mean anything. But prosecutors say this particular flyer matters because of what they allege happened afterward. According to the government, multiple alleged co-conspirators later attempted to ambush TB at a gas station in Blackshear, Georgia. And elsewhere in the filing, prosecutors described that May 2021 incident as the co-conspirators' first alleged attempt to ambush and kill TB. Again, that's an allegation from the government. It has not automatically been proven just because prosecutors included it in a court filing. But now you can see why investigators believe the concert flyer could be significant. And there's more. Prosecutors say the phone also contained a screenshot of a social media post from May of 2023 documenting that TB had been shot at in Blackshear, Georgia. So according to the government's theory, they're not looking at just one strange screenshot. They're looking at multiple pieces of material from different periods of time involving these same individuals. And prosecutors go as far as describing the material as multiple images related to seeking revenge against TB and TL. That's the government's interpretation of what they found. And Durk's attorneys are now fighting over whether this phone evidence should even be allowed into the case. But before we get to that, there's another question. How did police get this phone in the first place? For that, you have to go back to July 11, 2021. That morning, law enforcement responded to a suspected home invasion at Durk's residence in Brazelton, Georgia. According to a declaration from a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent who worked the case, investigators learned that there had been an exchange of gunfire between Durk and a family member on one side and multiple suspected intruders on the other. The agent says Durk admitted firing his weapon approximately 6 times as the suspected intruders were leaving. According to the filing, Durk said he fired those shots into the air. Investigators searched the property and reported finding multiple firearms, ammunition, and spent cartridge casings. The GBI agent says approximately 10 firearms were seized from the residence. Investigators also reported finding roughly 6 casings near the balcony where Durk said he fired his weapon. But law enforcement apparently had questions about what had happened. According to prosecutors, Durk and the family member did not immediately call 911. Investigators also described Durk as evasive and reluctant to assist with certain parts of the investigation. During the initial sweep of the home, officers also reported seeing suspected narcotics near a large bag of money. Investigators were trying to determine who carried out the alleged home invasion, why the house may have been targeted, and what led to the exchange of gunfire. And during that investigation, they seized electronic devices, including this cell phone. Georgia investigators later obtained another warrant specifically allowing them to search the phone. They created a forensic extraction, basically a digital copy of whatever data they were able to recover from the device. And that digital copy remained in Georgia evidence storage for years, until 2026. By that point, Durk was facing a completely separate federal prosecution in California. And on June 25, 2026, the FBI contacted investigators in Georgia and asked whether they could get copies of those old phone extractions. Georgia sent a hard drive. The FBI received it on July 6. 2 days later, federal investigators obtained another search warrant allowing them to examine the data for evidence connected to the federal murder and racketeering investigation. And that's when investigators say they identified the screenshots we've been talking about. But then they apparently discovered a problem. The original extraction was limited. According to prosecutors, the condition the phone was in when it was originally extracted may have prevented investigators from recovering everything. And remember, they apparently didn't have the normal text message conversations between the phone's user and other people. So federal investigators apparently believed there could still be additional information inside the actual phone. And that's when the FBI made another move. On July 9, 2026, the FBI asked Georgia investigators to send them the physical cell phone itself. Think about that. This device had originally been seized back in 2021. 5 years later, federal investigators still wanted the actual phone. The FBI received it on July 20th. And that same day, the government obtained another warrant allowing investigators to try a new extraction of the physical device in an attempt to recover additional potentially relevant material. And this may be the biggest unanswered part of the story, because this filing explains why investigators went back for the phone, but it doesn't publicly tell us everything they may have recovered from that newer extraction. And now Durk's attorneys are trying to keep evidence from this phone away from a jury. The defense filed a motion asking the judge to suppress evidence obtained from the device. Part of their argument challenges how the phone was originally seized in Georgia and how law enforcement kept the digital extraction for years afterward. Prosecutors are fighting back. They argue Georgia investigators legally seized the phone during the 2021 investigation, got a separate warrant before searching it, and were legally permitted to retain the forensic copy. The government also points out that the FBI wasn't involved in the original 2021 seizure. Federal investigators didn't receive the old extraction until July of 2026, and once they received it, prosecutors say they obtained their own federal warrants before searching the data and before trying to extract additional information from the physical phone. So now, the government wants the judge to deny Durk's request and allow this evidence to remain in the case. And that's where things stand. These documents do not prove that Durk personally wrote the message discussing the house arrest address. They also don't mean every allegation prosecutors are making has already been proven. But they do reveal something important. We now know what prosecutors believe some of this old phone evidence shows. We know why they believe the screenshots involving the people identified as TB and TL matter. And most importantly, we know the FBI went back 5 years later and asked for the actual physical phone because the original extraction apparently didn't give investigators everything they wanted. So now the question is simple. What did they find the second time? Because some of the detailed exhibits showing the actual images and metadata prosecutors are relying on remain under seal. And if federal investigators were able to recover additional information from that newer extraction, we may not have seen the most important part of this phone evidence yet. A device seized during a Georgia home invasion investigation in 2021 has now resurfaced 5 years later in a federal murder and racketeering case. And prosecutors believe some of what was recovered from that phone connects back to people and events surrounding the aftermath of King Von's death. Now the judge has to decide whether prosecutors will be allowed to use it. And depending on what investigators recovered when they went back for that physical phone, this story may be far from over.